he's sleeping. Sleeping on the way home. Maybe try to.
Okay, we're going to call our meeting to order. First thing we have is roll call, and I'll remind everybody that we're going to do individual roll call since Marcy is online. So we'll go start with Marcy.
Here.
John Waller.
Here.
Mike Bradley.
Present.
Mr. Wegman.
Here.
And Kreiner here. And next thing is to set the agenda. Anybody like to change or add to the agenda today?
Yes, President Preiner, staff would like to add Anoka County Ditch 102232 records correction next steps. Items requiring board action, I thought a new item 6, and we can push the check register to 7.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, then I'll need a motion to accept the agenda.
Madam President, I move to accept the agenda as amended.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Marcy Wynant.
Yes.
John Waller.
Yes.
Mike Bradley.
Yes.
Steve Wageman.
Yes.
And Pat Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. Approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, I move the approval of the February 7th, 2022 Rice Creek Watershed Board of Managers Workshop.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call the vote. Marcy?
Yes.
John Waller?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Yes.
Mr. Wageman?
Yes.
Pat Kreiner, yes. Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the February 9th, 2022 regular meeting of the Rice Creek Board of Managers.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We'll call the vote. Marcy Wynant?
Yes.
John Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
I abstain. I was not present.
Okay. Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. Consent agenda? Any changes on that today, Patrick?
No, President Preiner, 2 applications for your consideration today, presented without changes.
Madam President, I move the Caprock permit number 21-126 and 21-137.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call the vote. Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
Manager Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. Okay, open mic. Is there anybody in the audience? There's nobody present in the audience. Anybody on remote? Anybody that would like to speak today? Hearing none, we'll move to items requiring board action.
Yes, President Preiner, the first item you have before you is the Citizen Advisory Committee member approval. I see Beth has joined us for that item.
Okay, Beth?
Good morning, President Preiner, Board of Managers. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm pleased to submit a full slate to you for your consideration. It does include 2 potential new members who become members if you approve the slate. Ms. Schleicher from Anoka County and Dr. Lazarus from Ramsey County. We discussed them at a previous board workshop, and you had indicated that if they intended or if they would like to move forward with their applications after participating in the last CAC member, to bring it to you at a board meeting for your consideration, and we've done that. Do you have any questions about the memo or the candidates or the slate?
We'll have a motion, and then we'll have discussion. Page 34.
Madam, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, all right. Madam President, I move appoint the present slate of individuals to the 2022 Citizens Advisory Committee.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the vote. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. Thank you for all the hard work, Beth. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. A second year with a full slate. Congratulations.
Very good job. Yep, yep.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Kyle?
Yes, President Preiner, members of the board, we are here today to wrap up our process for the 2022 Stormwater Management Grants. In your packet, we've got funding recommendations laid out, and I will share those on the screen here momentarily. Maybe. There we go. All right. There we go. So again, as you'll recall, we had set aside $300,000 in our Stormwater Management Grant Fund in our program for the 2022 year. As we discussed at the last meeting during our public hearing, we received, I think, something like $677,000 or so dollars worth of requests. And we went through each of those applications at that public hearing. We had no public input received. But we do have the scoring and reviews as shown on the screen here from both your staff and engineer, as well as the Citizen Advisory Committee during their February meeting. As it turned out, all three review groups rated the same 6 applications in the top, although in slightly different order. And we have those ranked, if you will, from 1 to 10 on the screen here. Roseville being the top scoring application. And our recommendations are largely going to follow this. We discussed it during the public hearing. 4 of those applications that were ineligible for consideration during this time, and those happen to be the 4 that scored the lowest out of the 10 applications. The Arden Hills application has some regulatory unknowns, mostly due to wetland impact, a potential wetland impact, and a downstream peak rate increase to Round Lake. This application requires additional information, and I have spoken with city staff and their consulting engineer on this project last week about this application. They will be preparing some more of that information, possibly revising the project, and we may see that one come back to us later in the year for consideration. The remaining 3 applications, one from Ramsey County and 2 from White Bear Township, were considered to be ineligible due to the fact that they are really just maintenance projects of existing infrastructure. There's really nothing new proposed as a new project with those. And so along with that, we have the funding recommendations here as shown on the screen. And you'll notice that we're recommending funding 6 of these applications, which comes to a total of $435,000, which is more than is available in the grant program fund for 2022. As we try to do with these every year, and some years this comes up and some years it doesn't, we have 3 projects that really do fit very nicely into the district's capital improvement program within the Watershed Management Plan and its existing 2022 budget in other fund areas that we have established. Specifically, the Washington County application for their CASA 12 improvements fits very nicely into our what we call our regional BMP implementation fund, and that is a capital improvement project that's established for a couple different purposes. It's kind of in some ways a little bit of a catch-all, but it funds reuse and other regional practices, kind of in the, if you will, the developing area of the district, and specifically that capital improvement project also identifies implementation of the Southeast White Bear Lake subwatershed assessment. And that's where this, within that subwatershed assessment is where this project fits very nicely, and there's a good nexus there. The New Brighton project, which is a flood mitigation project at their public works facility, this specifically implements a portion of the Ramsey County Ditches 2, 3, and 5 basic water management project, which of course has its own capital improvement project established in our watershed plan. I will note that I believe the The Washington County project, certainly, I don't know the exact budget number in 2022 for that fund. It's certainly more than $10,000. I think it's in the realm of $150,000 or $200,000 in that range. For RCD 2, 3, and 5, the district has $200,000 budgeted for 2022 for implementation of that project. So certainly we can cover that. And then Ramsey County's project at Bald Eagle Lake, again, fits very nicely into the Bald Eagle Lake water management project in our watershed plan. And that in our 2022 budget, that fund has got $25,000 established in it. So that project would fit well into both our budget and the watershed plan. And that leaves those remaining 3 projects, Roseville, Fridley, and Ramsey County, at $100,000 apiece, using up the $300,000 in the Stormwater Management Grant Fund. With that, I would certainly entertain any questions the board would have, but barring that, staff recommends approval of Resolution 2022-03, which is in your packet, which would award funds as presented on the screen here, and order those 6 selected projects in accordance with Statute 103B 251.
Questions for Kyle before we do our resolution?
Yeah, Madam President, the Bald Eagle, the $25,000, you're proposing to take that from the water management fund that are left over from the Allen program, is that correct?
Madam President, Manager Bradley, that is somewhat slightly incorrect. We have $25,000 in our 2022 budget, and that is ad valorem funds. So that would not utilize the water management district funds that are, if you will, left over from the alum treatment. The use of those funds is a little more restricted, and I would not recommend using those funds for this county project.
Which is
ad valorem would be more appropriate.
Yeah, which would have been my concern, that if we were going to use the funds raised by the water management district funding, I would think at a minimum need to approval of the Bald Eagle Area Association, as we've promised them and it says we would do on our management plan. I'm not aware that we had a White Bear Lake Water Management Fund ad valorem piece, other than the curly pond leaf. I mean, I love the program. It's a good thing. I'm just asking for understanding of that, because we also have promised to fund the curly leaf program this year.
Yeah.
I'm looking at our administrator first.
Yeah, President Priner, Board of Managers, generally I'd say for each of the districts, water management districts that it establishes, that does have that additional restriction or limited area of use, there are companion funds that the district budgets, creates for those types of situations where the use may not be definitively appropriate, and so we can rely on the other ad valorem to do some of that work. There is also a curly leaf pondweed fund within your budget that is separate from the White Bear Lake. So I think we're covered, and Kyle made the good point as well.
Steve?
Well, can you just kind of drill in on that a little bit? I'm not sure I understand how the ad valorem funds, you're saying that some are put aside for this? Or how's that working? I mean, how are you deciding that ad valorem can be used for this?
Yeah, President Priner, Board of Managers, and sorry for, Teresa was wanting to show me some. Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so to answer the question, within your approved budget, and Teresa's handing me the cover page, if you will, that lists out all the funds within the various programs that you've established. And we place funds to cover the studies, the areas of concern, curly leaf pondweed. The water management districts are noted, those are restricted, and then a lot of them have, like I said, companion funds to replicate or allow for the distribution or the way that you'd like to approach funding the projects. Am I helping here?
Well, you're opening my eyes to something I wasn't aware of, but yeah, you're helping.
Yeah.
You're explaining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to stop there.
You could leave
At
it
risk
there and
of-
I could,
Yeah.
That'd probably be a smart thing.
that's far enough.
When we do our budget next year, we may want to come back and talk about this.
Very well. President Preiner, I'll just note that that's close at hand. Next March's workshop, we'll begin discussing the different public drainage system projects that are forthcoming, and that will begin to allude to what our budget looks like. I'll be sure to point out the various funds, and we can talk about how they may interact together between the various
Yeah,
programs.
I was prepared to support using our fund balance reserve to the extent that, you say something came up this year that we'd like to do that we didn't think of. But you're telling me I don't have to do that. That's comparable
Yep.
in my mind.
Yep. Point of distinction, and we'll dive into it more when we get into the budget. Here's what we anticipate spending. And when we're doing that, we're also looking at, okay, now what's our levy? Where's the revenue going to come from? And for some of these instances, we are pulling some of that fund balance to address that. So I'll make sure to point that out so you know where those are coming from. I think President Preiner, Mr. Otterness maybe had something to share.
Go ahead.
Madam President, no, I wasn't planning to add anything, but I guess I can make just one quick add-on to this to note that the district has in the past and continues to have a number of different funds that are allocated for each one of these different programs that are listed in the Watershed Management Plan. And, for example, there's been the Southwest Urban Lakes that the district has funded every year. And that really doesn't have any sort of designated projects associated with it on any given year, but we know that there are the possibility of these city projects, like, the ones we see here, that may pop in there that are appropriate to meet the goals of that fund. And similarly, we've had funds for Clear Lake, we've had them for Peltier Lake, the chain of lakes. There's been a number of different funds that have been available each year in the budget that have been allocated specifically for these type of projects that may pop up.
So, Madam President, just to be clear here, Kyle,
I believe he's still with us.
okay,
I'm here, yes.
all right, there you are. So, there's $300,000 in the budget for this? Which three projects are we talking about we're gonna give the 300 grand to? Would you name them for me, please?
Yep, Madam President, Manager Waller, the three projects that would get the stormwater management grant funding would be Roseville, Fridley, and Ramsey County's project at Silver Lake Road at $100,000 apiece. And then again, Washington County would be $10,000 from our regional BMP implementation fund. New Brighton would be $100,000 from Ramsey County Ditches 2, 3, and 5, Basic Water Management or Implementation Fund. Again, that's not a water management district. I may have the terminology wrong there. It's an ad valorem fund. And then Ramsey County's project at Bald Eagle Boulevard would be $25,000 from our Bald Eagle Lake Implementation Fund. Again, noting that is not water management district funding. It's ad valorem.
And so, all of these projects that you're funding are ad valorem taxes, correct?
That is correct.
And then, I guess when we come to the budget, my comment is apparently 300 grand isn't enough. We should look at maybe reevaluating that amount of money. And finally, as I said at the last meeting, when you presented this at the Citizens Advisory Committee, I thought there was a lot of extra work that went in here, and I was very happy to see so many projects were funded and eligible because of the limitation of the $300,000, that you found other sources within the plan and budget to make this available. So you did a fine job. Thank you. And to anyone else who helped you.
So just to put it into my kind of question, so actually, The bald eagle sapphire baffles are not alone in terms of going to our general budget to find funding, in particular like the $100,000 for New Brighton, which is our 2, 3, and 5. In our budget, it's because you have included in our budget money to deal with that overall $22 million project.
President Preiner, Manager Bradley, right on. That's exactly correct. As we often talk about the willing landowner, and we're uncertain as to when that willing landowner may become present for good projects to move forward. So we budget accordingly, looking for those. And the point of clarification is that when we budget the dollars, if they're not used in that year, so if nothing came up for RCD 235 and we have that line item, we would not then next year go, hey, we need another 100,000. We haven't spent the other one. And so that's where we draw on the fund balance and just go, okay, well, we'll just thank you very much, and we won't tax once again the landowners for that same need or intent.
And when you say tax landowners, you're talking about ad valorem again.
That is correct.
Okay, we have a resolution on page 38. If there's no further discussion, if there is, we can continue.
Yes, managers, President Preiner, at the top of page 38, there's a simple motion to move the resolution if you like.
Anybody?
So, Madam President, I would move Resolution 2022-03, ordering the 2022 Stormwater Management Grant Projects pursuant to Minnesota Statute 103B.251, specifically approving the 6 projects outlined on page 39 of that motion for the City of Fridley, Fire Lake, and Danube Ponds Pretreatment Project for $100,000, City of New Brighton Public Works Facility Flood Mitigation Project for $100,000, the City of Roseville C2 and Simpson Underground Filtration for $100,000, Ramsey County Bald Eagle Boulevard Saffel Baffle for $25,000, Ramsey County Silver Lake Road at Rice Creek Stabilization and Saffel Baffle for $100,000, and Washington County CSAH 12 improvements for $10,000, for a total of $435,000.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, there'll be a roll call. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes?
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
Manager Preiner, yes. Motion passes. Okay.
Thank you.
I think we have Matt next. Carp Management Services.
So let me just add my thank you again, just like Manager Waller did.
Yeah.
I was impressed by all the work. I was always hold my breath as we come in, figuring out how we're going to get this done with our budget requirements, limitations, and a nice job done by all. Thank you.
Very true.
Okay. President Preiner, Board of Managers, just want to make sure my screen is showing up there properly. Looks like you can see the presentation. Yes?
Yes. Mhm.
Excellent. So President Preiner, Board of Managers, thanks for having me this morning. I've got a couple of items. The first one is regarding both items are regarding our Carp program, Carp Management Program. The first one is to consider professional services agreements for 2022. So I've got a short presentation outlining what the scope of that work will be. These items start on page 56 of your board packet. Some of these slides are going to be a review. I think you've seen them before, so I'll go through them rather quickly as a review. But obviously, if you have any questions, we can come back to them when we're done. So we're continuing the Rice Creek Watershed District Carp Management Plan that was approved by the board in 2018. We've been having these professional services agreements with various vendors since the start of this management plan. And as a reminder, our management plan calls for at least removal of at least 50% of adult carp from the Long Lake Lino Chain of Lakes system every year. Now, because we're improving our efficiency year after year, we've kind of bumped that goal up to say we're shooting to remove more than 60% of the carp population from that system annually. And we were able to achieve that last year. We also do have some goals related to suppressing juvenile recruitment. I can talk a little bit more about that. Again, with this program, we're always focused on tools and techniques that are effective, efficient, and reliable. And we're learning that, well, we knew that we'd have to be, but we're constantly reminded by Carp that we need to have a flexible approach. So we need to evaluate how we're doing every year, be flexible, and adjust our approach as necessary. So when it comes to removing now over 60% of the carp, here's what we did last year, and I think we shared this summary with you summer of last year, but really quickly again, we were able to remove, we can see on the right-hand side of this graphic here, there's a lot of statistics here, but again, our goal is to remove at least 50%. Last year, we were able to remove 68% of the total carp population in the Long Lake Lino Chain of Lakes system. Now, there was a strong year class in 2018 of juvenile carp, and we knew this was going to be an issue. This year, we're bumping up our removal goal to 20,000. So last year we did 23,000. This year we're shooting for, oh, I'm sorry, no, this was not right. Last year we had about 16,400. This year we're shooting for 20,000 carp in this calendar year. So here are the numbers year after year of carp removed from this system. 2016 and 2017 were really program development years. That's back when we were working with University of Minnesota, Dr. Peter Sorensen, and a graduate student. We were just kind of beginning this management program, so this is when it was being developed. The management plan was adopted in 2018, like I talked about. And starting in 2019, we really jumped into full program implementation, and we've been steadily ramping up our output, if you will, of carp removal since then. So last year it was, about 16,500 carp removed. So an interesting thing that we're seeing in the data, at least I think this is interesting, is a shifting population size and age structure. So these graphs here indicate lengths of carp. So the top graph is 2016. Here we saw really a lot of larger, older carp in the system. And slowly over the years, as we're removing these carp, we're seeing a downward shift in the size structure of the population. So we've been very successful in removing the majority of the large carp in the system. We know that there was a large 2018 year class. That was a good year for reproduction in the Lino Chain of Lakes. And so this is the population that we're targeting now. The tools, and we've talked about these before, the two primary tools that we're using to remove common carp from the system are baited box nets. So these are used primarily in Long Lake. So the carp are baited with cracked corn. They come into this box net. It's box shaped with sides, and then the carp are removed. There was a really great presentation. Well, I participated in the presentation at MAUD. Perhaps the great part of it was from Carp Solutions talking about how they have been improving their efficiency of this technique over the years. And I actually even learned a few things about some techniques and technologies that they're using just this past year that have really improved the efficiency of this remote and automated techniques. So that was the removal from 2021 last year. They got just about 7,000 carp. And then, of course, we're also using this low voltage guidance system. Here's one being installed. Those are the electrodes that go in Rice Creek. And what we're trying to do here is stop carp as they're moving from Long Lake to the Lino Chain of Lakes every spring, stop them and direct them into a trap for removal. So here is the trap. In the top left-hand corner of the photo, you can just barely see the railroad bridge that crosses over Rice Creek. This is at the downstream end of the Long Lake Sediment Basin. There's the electrode array going across the creek, and then the carp are being directed into this trap for removal. In the past couple of years, we've improved the efficiency of those systems also by incorporating electric guidance systems and these conveyor belts to move the carp up and out of the creek. So in 2022, we're really continuing to use these same strategies, but improving the efficiency year after year. Last year, this electric herding system that we installed, or the aggregation system inside the trap, worked quite well. We've got some ideas to continue improving that this year, but that improved some efficiency last year. One of the issues that we're having at this site in recent years is low water levels and accumulating sediment. So here's an aerial shot of the Long Lake Sediment Basin. You can see water levels are quite shallow all the way across the Long Lake Sed Basin, and we've been talking about how it's essentially full with sediment. But the issue is compounded with the fact that we have extraordinarily low water levels in Rice Creek. Here's a shot of this sediment basin this past fall. These water levels are, nearing historic lows really last fall as part of that long-term drought that we had. So we have some concerns about being able to implement the removal with water levels being so low this spring. Obviously, things can turn around quickly. We could get, a big snowmelt runoff and some rain, and water levels could bounce up, and then we'd be in good shape. But if things continue to be dry and very low water levels, the contract that we're proposing with Carp Services does have some flexibility built in so that we can move some of our effort away from spring migration removal and into summer box netting removal. So again, we need to be flexible in the way that we implement this program. If Mother Nature throws us a curveball, we have to be ready to switch from one tool to the other. The contract that we have before you allows for that. So just a couple of highlights of the contracts. The first one with Carp Solutions, the primary cost of this contract remains labor. However, Carp Solutions' hourly rate is very competitive, and if we are successful, if we continue being successful, this cost should decline over time. Something new this year, actually a couple new things this year, but the first one is we're going to be collecting some additional data on carp reproduction, including this possible southern migration route. So here's Long Lake at the bottom of the map. We know that the vast majority of the carp population moves in between Long Lake and the Lino chain of lakes in the spring. We're intercepting them just on the north end of Long Lake. But we also know that carp can and sometimes move to the south towards the E2 wetland complex and that small channel that goes through New Brighton. So this year we're going to be installing a pit tag antenna, not very expensive, but very effective at measuring when carp might be going up that route and how many of them. We've got some plans in place. If we think that that is an issue, we've got some plans in place to address that with a physical barrier. I think the board is familiar with some of the physical barriers that we've installed in the past, like the one on Judicial Ditch 1 by Bald Eagle Lake. I think that those plans have worked very well, so we could implement something like that in this system if necessary. But we're going to collect the data this year and find out if that's necessary. Other highlights from the contract this year, we've got a couple of other lakes where we're shooting to do population surveys. Howard Lake, we actually was in the plan last year to do a population survey, but water levels were so low we couldn't get access to Howard Lake. Again, just really low water levels. Centerville Lake, we have plans to do a carp population survey this year. We view this as a prerequisite for other potential management options like alum, or other lake management techniques that we might use on Centerville Lake. So we're going to assess to see if the carp population is an issue on Centerville Lake. Now this other contract, smaller contract, is with Always Fish. I don't think you've heard this name before. This is a new company, but a familiar face. We've been working with Procom, a company out of Poland, for the last 5 years. Their primary contact, Emil Kukulski, has left Procom and started his own company, Always Fish. So what we did this winter and this spring is ask for small proposals from both Procom, the company that we were working with, and Emil Kukulski, who has started his own company, Always Fish. We reviewed those proposals. The primary deciding factor, really the only deciding factor for this year, is which one of those two proposals demonstrated that they were familiar with the system, familiar with the tools, familiar with our program. The reason is our 2022 work plan here is relatively limited. It's really just using our existing equipment to implement our program. So it's vital that this equipment works when it needs to work and works throughout the spring season. So ensure 100% functionality during the spring migration. That's what we need here. We're also going to be replacing the Electrode arrays. That was a small, well, that was the larger line item within the contract with Always Fish. This is a photo of the Electrode array when they were brand new and being installed in the creek. They don't look like that anymore. These are metal pipes being installed in the water. The electrical current that goes through the pipes actually accelerates corrosion on the metal itself. We knew when we purchased these that they had a lifespan. Procom was estimating that they would last about 5 years, and that's about how long they've lasted. So these are components that need to be replaced about every 5 years or so, and that's proposed for this year. So those are the contract highlights. We've got the proposed motions at the bottom of my memo. I believe that's on page 57. They're also on your screen, but happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move to authorize the administrator and advice of council enter into a professional services agreement with Carp Solutions LLC for an amount not to exceed $104,280. Administrators are also authorized to approve contract amendments for additional work not to exceed 5% of that contract cost, which would be $5,214.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call. Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes.
Madam President, I move to authorize the administrator and advice of council to enter into a professional service agreement with Always Fish for an amount not to exceed $26,800.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call. Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, Madam Chair, Board of Managers, I do have one other second item beginning on page 87. I do not have a presentation for this one. This is renewing the access agreement with Ramsey County for this carp management program. So the tools that you just saw being implemented in Rice Creek just upstream of Long Lake, that is on land owned by Ramsey County Parks. And on page 87 of your packet, there's my memo and there's the map showing where this location is. We had an access agreement with Ramsey County Parks, a 5-year access agreement that expired last year. We've been working with them over the winter to develop a new access agreement. I think because things have gone well and we've been a good guest on Ramsey County's land, so to speak, they are open to executing a 20-year access agreement at this site. So that's good, something that we won't have to do again for some time. Legal counsel at Rice Creek has reviewed this. I think we're in a good place with the access agreement, but the motion does allow for non-substantive changes after the motion, should that be necessary. Not much else to say here. I think this is just a fairly routine matter, but happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Matt? If not, we have a motion.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I move to authorize the administrator on advice of council and with non-substantive changes to enter into an access agreement with Ramsey County to conduct carp management activities at the Rice Creek Long Lake site.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you again. Okay, Nick, you're next.
Yes, President Preiner, Board of Managers. The next item is a confidential personnel issue. I did send out an email to all managers on that. That included a proposed motion. I'm happy to discuss it with you as best possible if need be.
Madam President, I'll move an approved unpaid leave plan pursuant to the terms of the Administrator's Memorandum, February 18th, 2022. Should need any discussion for it.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Kreiner, yes. Motion passes. Okay.
Yes, President Preiner, the next item on the agenda is the one we added at the beginning of the agenda, which was an Oak County Ditch 102232, the records correction next step, and Tom Schmidt is with us to lead you through that.
Madam President, before he goes forward with that, I'm going forward, I will recuse myself from participating in the Anoka County Ditch 102232 matter because it involves the financial interest of a family member. And so I'll step out in the audience till you're done talking.
And I would just say I did receive this from Manager Wagaman yesterday, so that's the proper procedure.
So, Madam President, I have a comment here about this.
Okay, well, let's let him go down.
Yeah, you go sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Madam President, I believe I'm the only member of the board that was here when this was passed. It was passed in 2007, as I recollect. And it came right after former manager Hockey was president at the time. And there were some issues about ditches that were involved. And with managers who are not present on this board at this time, or at the time this was passed. And what this does is, first of all, I don't feel that Manager Wagaman should have to recuse himself to make my position clear here. I did not vote for this at 2007.
Right. I'm sorry, Manager Wagaman, just to be clear, you're referring to the conflict of interest statement that's within the district policy and procedure manual?
As it applies to ditches.
Okay, thank
As
you.
it applies to ditches.
Okay.
I think that the conflict of interest when it applies to drainage ditches is really unfair, and that any manager who's on a ditch is no different than the other managers or other citizens that own property on that ditch. And that I feel they have a duty to vote. It's kind of like driver's licenses. You know, every legislator, senator, representative has a driver's license. Therefore, he shouldn't be able to vote on driver's licenses because he has an interest in it. That's a little bit too far. And so I think that in this particular instance, when it comes to the drainage situations, that this rule which was made, and at the time I felt it was very, very restrictive on the drainage ditch issue. And that in cases of, for example, if you live in Washington County and you happen to be a board manager like I am and live on a ditch, and you have to be removed from participating in that, you don't have representation for anyone in that area down there that neighbors or such that are on that ditch. And my understanding was in 1969 there was a Supreme Court ruling that allowed people that were on the Coon Creek watershed to vote on issues that had to do with the repair of ditches that they were property owners on or family members were property owners. And I also feel that in the end, this was a great problem when it came to us resolving 5362, but I won't get into that today. It's been a problem with JD2, 62. And so my point here is that I think this policy of recusal or interest when it comes to apply to public drainage systems that property owners are on or managers on is far too restrictive, and it removes his duty to, any manager's duty to vote, and it also removes the voice that manager may provide that necessarily isn't the same as the unanimous as the other board members. So with that, we'll proceed. I respect his point of view, what he's doing at this time. That's nothing, I'm not here to influence one way or the other. I'm just saying that I've always felt that this particular thing, when it comes to drainage ditches, this policy is way too restrictive.
Madam President, I agree with Manager Waller's observation that when a manager is affected in no different way than any other person, for example, I live on a lake that has been the beneficiary of a number of programs and projects, but the benefits to me personally are no different than any other person. And when that occurs, then clearly there should not be a conflict of interest. In fact, it would be harmful to us as a policy-making body to disallow ourselves to participate and represent the areas, in fact, we were appointed from, to assist and make sure that they were adequately represented. I don't know specifically why, look at your chance, why I absolutely.
No, this hasn't got to the, this hasn't got to the
As
issue yet, but
soon
just
as
wait
I'm
1
done
minute.
talking, you can.
Just wait a second, and then you can go ahead.
So, I don't know specifically what it is that Manager Wagaman, he's about to tell me, caused him to decide that his interests fell outside of that general principle. But to the extent that he did it because of this application of that general principle, then I would agree with you. But I don't have a specific knowledge of why he's doing
So,
this.
Madam President, just to finish, I don't have any objection to Manager Wagman's individual consciousness to his decision what to do. That's his decision. I'm not here to influence it. But since this has come up today, it's an opportunity that I'm saying it needs to be reviewed in the essence of ditches. That's my point that I'm making.
And I don't think it needs to be reviewed because I don't think it applies to us acting in our general capacity where our interests are no different than the general public.
Well,
I don't disagree with, I don't disagree with you, Manager Bradley, but in the past, it has been applied.
Well,
And so
let's
it needs
hold
to
this
stop.
issue. Manager Wakeman, please, yeah. And then I do want to talk to the attorneys out there.
When this originally came up, I had Manager Waller's same opinion. And it was for the reason that I couldn't figure out how I was affected. I'm on that ditch, and I don't feel like I have any less rights than anybody else in the ditch. And I'm not sure how the person that's on there is my father, but I don't see how he benefits any more than any of the other people that are on the ditch system that I've been dealing with for 20 years on that issue, and now they have nobody to go to. They have no man. I've been dealing with them for 20 years on that ditch, and now I don't know if I'm supposed to just tell them I can't talk to them anymore or what. I'm not sure how that works, but I agree with Manager Waller. I recused myself because the lawyer said I had to. But I do agree with him, but I will stick with what I said because the lawyers say that's what has to be done.
So, Madam President, just one question. Which attorney?
Let's just leave this out. I want to talk to both attorneys with their opinion on this and see if it's something that can be changed even though we're in the process of this.
President Preiner, I think it's probably, if you want to hear from both, that's great.
Yeah.
John Kolb, I know, has had some discussion with me, and perhaps it's best to start with him.
Okay. Mr. Kolb.
Madam President, is there a specific question, or would you like me to comment generally about my opinion in this matter?
Well, we're going to need your opinion, but we also want to comment. We've had board members say that they don't think this is the right thing. And if it's our policy, then is it a policy change? Or for this situation, I mean, this isn't gonna be done today or tomorrow. Is it something where we may change it and be able to move on so Mr. Wegman can be in the conversation? So,
Okay, thank you for that, Madam President. I believe your bylaw already addresses the specific concern raised by Manager Waller in that it says that this would not apply in an instance where the manager's interest would be no different than any other member of the public. And so I think your bylaw already addresses that situation. The difference here, in my opinion, having had conversation with Manager Wagaman and also having had the historical context of what is actually occurring in this portion of reestablishment of records on ACD 102232, leads me to the conclusion that this is a fairly unique situation in that the specific issue now that is being addressed by the board in the proceedings directly relates to a request and a concern being expressed by a very discrete group of landowners. And specifically, Manager Wagaman's father has been very vocal on this issue and has asserted on several occasions that this directly affects the value of his property and his ability to drain his property and specific damages to his property. And in discussing this with Manager Wagaman, the sense that I got of his motivation in wanting to participate in these proceedings was more of an advocate for his father's concerns than it was as a general owner of property expressing a concern about a specific system. And in that, my concern for the integrity of the board and for Manager Wagaman in particular was that there be no question as to objectivity and motivation as to what he might say in deliberations and how he might vote in deliberations and what actions he might take to influence the outcome. That does not direct anything untoward about Manager Wagaman's motivations. It is simply an observation and an opinion I formed after my discussions with him and with the context of what's actually happening or potentially could happen in these proceedings. And so out of concern for the board and the integrity of the board's decision-making process, I did advise Manager Wagaman that it would be wise for him to comply with the requirements of the bylaw and that I believe he did have a conflict of interest in this situation. And I'll be happy to take any follow-up questions the board might have.
any questions for Mr. Kolb?
I have a question, Madam President. So I'm just going to put this out in a fantasy example. It's not particular this particular issue. Just a what if. What if a board member didn't agree with you and sat here and didn't recuse himself? What enforcement do you have other than to shame the board member into relieving himself of his duty?
The board does have a self-governance function, and I wouldn't characterize it as shaming, but I think it would be appropriate in the board's self-governance function to point out to a manager the potential for a conflict of interest, the potential of an appearance of conflict of interest, the potential that that manager may not truly be able to act objectively in the circumstances, and to encourage that member to comply with, or at least consider compliance with, the board's opinion of application of that particular bylaw. I do not, at least I'm not prepared today to comment on what other enforcement authority the board might have, but I do believe it falls within the board's self-governance obligations to at least address those issues among its members and to encourage the individual board members to self-examine what their motivations are and what biases they might have in any instance, and to consider whether or not those biases or that relationship fall within the articulated limitations of the bylaw, and then make a decision appropriately. In the end, I cannot disagree with what I think is being implied by Manager Waller's hypothetical, that this does come down to an individual manager's assessment of whether they have a conflict of interest or not. So again, I'm not prepared today to talk about what internal enforcement authorities the board might have, but I do believe that the board has a self-governance obligation, which would require at least the encouragement of an individual manager to examine whether or not there is a conflict and whether or not that manager can act objectively in any proceeding coming before the board for decision.
Madam President, so as I understand it, after listening to that long speech, that couched in the words of potential and possible and such, that if an individual manager, after examining his conscience, made a decision that he had a duty, and his duty was no different than other landowners on this involved, and his colleagues disagreed with him, and he sat here, you don't really have an answer today as to what can be done, or what kind of penalty, or why. See, there's no enforcement to it. And I realize you're not prepared, as you said, about the enforcement issue, but I don't believe there's anything you can really do about it.
So, do you mind if I, because I can end, I think I can.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't mind recusing myself at all. I do think I would fight just as hard for anybody as I would fight for my dad, so I don't think that's an issue. I'm a fighter. If I think I'm right, I go for it. I don't care who it is. So I don't think that's an issue, but I don't have a problem recusing myself simply because in the law, it said that the president was allowed to ask for information from that manager if she thought it was permanent or if the president thought it was pertinent to the issue. And I'm comfortable with that being the case. My problem with recusing myself was that I have been dealing for 20 years with all the people on this ditch system, and now I kind of feel like I'm out of the loop, and I'm not even sure what I tell them on the phone when they call me. They call me all the time. And so I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but I'm comfortable as long as I know that the president can ask me something that we don't have to waste a bunch of money on finding out that I already know, because I probably know this issue better than anybody else because I've been involved for 20 years. So I just see the board wasting money on things that I could probably tell them or at least give them information on. And I'm comfortable as long as that's still the case.
Okay, so to clarify that, you're saying you wouldn't expect to vote, but you
No.
would like your input into the discussion?
Well, I would love to
if
have
there-
input if I
if there-
could, but
okay.
as long as there's something comes up that if you want my opinion on it, because I know it, and you can ask it and it not be a problem, then I don't have a problem recusing myself. And that's what it said if I read
That's what it reads, yeah.
read our rule right, maybe the attorney should speak to that, because that does matter whether I recuse myself. If I have that correct, that the president can ask advice, can ask information of me if they so choose. Is that correct?
Madam President, and I know, Louis, I don't want to interrupt you. Well, I did interrupt you. I apologize for that. I think that Manager Wagaman's, or Mr. Wagaman in this instance, this particular instance, his articulation, I think, is fair. I believe the question is whether he is speaking in his capacity as a member of the board, or whether he is speaking and providing input to the board's decision-making as a member of the public with an interest and with specific information that might have bearing on the board's decision-making. And that goes back then to the integrity of the board making, the public's perception of how the board goes about making its decision, and the difference between those two things. So I don't disagree. Manager Wagaman may well have information that is relevant to the board's decision-making, but we want to, and the bylaw seeks to avoid the perception that someone is sitting in their individual or their official capacity and influencing a decision that has a direct bearing on this financial or other substantial interest of a family member, in this case in particular. So that'd be my response to Manager Wagaman's comment. I do believe that the board would still value his thoughts and information that he might have. It's just more of an issue of in what capacity is he offering that, and what is the perception of the public as to the integrity of the board's decision-making process, with whether he is advocating from his perch on the dais or whether he is advocating as a member of the public.
And personally, I don't care where I'm doing it from as long as the information gets to the board.
So, Madam
That's what matters to me.
Okay.
So, Madam President, my point is that I've seen this on 3 different ditches now, 5362, JD2, and on 102232 now. I think that rule is far too restrictive. I think this issue about the financial benefit that comes about is probably overblown. And I think that, you remember, this rule really came about because they had used minor maintenance money on a previous board before any of us were here to take care of a ditch that had been abandoned, and that it was a private ditch. And so the ones that we ended up having this overreaching rule, in my opinion. And I'm just saying I think it needs to be re-examined because it has harmed the general public in getting things accomplished for the stormwater management system. And I'll leave it at that. We've spent enough time. I've already disrupted the meeting, and I apologize to all of you, but I think that this was just way over the reach, and there's no definition in there as to what goes on.
I wanted to ask Louis first if he had any comments on this.
Madam President, just a couple of brief comments. First of all, I also had a conversation with Manager Wagaman. I agree with everything that Mr. Kolb has outlined. Our legal opinions are consistent. I would say on the specific provisions of the bylaws on conflict of interest, we've been involved in the successive iterations of that bylaw over the years. It is largely consistent with Minnesota statutes, Chapter 10A, which lay out conflict of interest provisions for local government officials generally. There are some specific provisions that Rice Creek has added to its bylaws that are also generally consistent with how other watershed districts operate. But these specific provisions that are unique have to do with specifically acknowledging the role of a manager who has recused himself or herself being available at the president's call for providing information. So I think how this bylaw has been applied over time is a matter of individual manager and board members' discretion. But I think largely the policy that's reflected there is consistent with the law. And in this particular case, Mr. Kolb and I agree as to how the rule applies to the situation.
So, Madam President, I'll make one last comment, I promise. Okay. And that is this. The managers have a duty to vote. And that vote is more importantly recorded than what the manager or the individual as a private citizen would from the dais of the public. And it also, why it's important is because that manager may be reflecting a minority voice. It's very important, and it should be recorded. And I think that's an important part that needs to be considered. With that, Madam President, I yield the floor. Let's move on and fix this up.
We haven't heard from Mike. Do you have any comments on this?
Just so that, to me, I don't even know what we're coming up on the agenda today. So, so I don't know how it applies to there. But, as far as I know, all we're trying to do at this time is establish the as constructed and subsequently improved base. And that is the same interest for everybody on the ditch.
Yes.
If we were trying to determine whether or not there were because of how it was done, there was damages to a particular piece of property, that would be a different thing to me. Then we would care about whether there was financial interest to a family member. But right now, all I want to know is what the proper base is for the as constructed and subsequently improved on that ditch. I think that's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're going to work on next. This was the prelude to all this, and I want to say that if Mr. Wegman comments during any, other than this, when we get into the next part, it will be as Mr. Wegman, not as a board member, as of now. I mean, if we change it, we can change it. So we'll set the stage and that'll begin this discussion. Tom, I think
Yep.
you're on.
Yep.
Or Nick?
President Preiner, I'll just add, it's important to note, I think, that Manager Wegman did bring this up at the last meeting. He asked for the structure and such. The attorneys made themselves available for the issue, and here we are. We can certainly bring this to the next workshop, which I think was part of the discussion at that time. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Tom, please go ahead.
Tom?
You're mute.
Yeah.
How about now?
Better.
Thank you, Madam President and Board of Managers. As Manager Bradley noted, we're at the point now of a long process that started back in 2021 to correct the drainage system record for 102232. And now the next step is to accept the engineer's report on additional investigation that you requested, and ordering and setting a continued public hearing, date and location.
Okay, any questions for Tom? Nick? Comment?
No.
Okay, so what we have is Resolution 2022-04. That was, I believe, sent or handed out to us.
Correct.
Okay.
This was made available, President Preiner, to the Board of Managers via email and also made available to the public. Motion is within the document that was shared.
Yep. Everybody have that? Resolution 2022-04. Somebody have it? Got it?
Well, Madam President, I'll move resolution 2022-4, Rice Creek Watershed District findings and order receiving reports and setting a date for continued final hearings to reestablish a correct drainage system record for Anoka County Ditch 102232, Statutes 103E.101, Subdivision 4. And the order says that the Board of Managers accepts the engineer's technical memorandum, Addendum 1, dated January 13th, 2022. B, engineer's recommendations regarding the as-constructed condition of ACD 102232 within the scope of its report is subject to modification and final board approval after public hearings. C, Board of Managers directs its administrator to notice acceptance of the technical memorandum, Addendum 1, and the final hearing in these proceedings to be held April 11th, 2022 at the City of Shoreview City Council at 6 p.m. D, notice of the final hearing shall be provided as required by statutes 103E.101, Subdivision 4A, and District Policy.
Just a quick correction, at 6:30 p.m.
Did I missay?
Yes,
I
it's still right on the
apologize.
record.
Yes, it's at 6:30 p.m. on April 11th, 2022, the City of Shoreview City Council Chambers.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll
Thank you,
second
Madam
that.
President.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Madam President?
Yes.
So I just want clarification, because it says the addendum was dated January 13th, 2022. And my last recollection was that we had a discussion at a workshop, which would have predated that. And I just want to know if, what the January 13th amendment is based on.
Madam President?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Manager Bradley, what you discussed at that workshop was a draft at that time, and so we basically finalized it, put a final stamp on it, and redated it after that.
So otherwise, as finalized, it's as it was presented and had general consensus at our board meeting.
President Priner, Manager Bradley, yes, the workshop materials were drafted at that time. The board had directed the engineer to look further, and if the board felt that that wasn't sufficient, it was draft so that they could proceed again before finalizing. At the workshop, there was consensus, it was acceptable, and therefore Houston made it a final document. Chris, I don't know if President Priner, if Mr. Arden has anything else to add?
Anything else?
No, how you described that is correct.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Just clarification, so all we're doing really is taking and getting that report to go to the public for a final hearing?
That's correct.
Correct.
Yes. Public hearing, and at that time, the board may deem some of the public comment important, in which you could investigate further, or otherwise, you're just, what the engineer did at this point is sufficient for you to proceed.
What we're really doing is bringing this to a head where we can get it there.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, any further discussion? Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman abstained? And Manager Priner? Yes. Okay, we will move forward. Thank you. Good discussion. Okay, next thing is Red Path, I believe.
Yep. Madam President, I move to approve the check register dated February 23rd, 2022 in the amount of $242,486.77 prepared by Red Path and Company.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passed. Okay, what are we here? Staff reports. Anybody have any questions for any of the staff? Seeing none, we'll go to our calendar. Any questions on the calendar? Or changes if anybody has anything? Let's see. Okay, I'm the next, March 2nd. Oh, good, I'm having a root canal right before that.
Perfect.
Oh.
Happy birthday to you.
Ouch. Okay, anything else?
Well, certainly if in light of your birthday, if you'd like to switch, I'd be happy.
I was going to offer the same thing. So.
Let me see what time it was at.
You can just let me know.
Okay, because if it was 2 or 3, I might have you do that for me.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Seeing anything else? We got a calendar, administrator updates. Nick?
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, just a couple items. I'll note that the state is now accepting applications, accepting water infrastructure projects to be placed on a list. And I did ask Kyle just to comment on this item and how it's maybe specific to district's Ramsey County Project 235.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick, Madam President, members of the board. So right now, through PCA and the Public Facilities Authority, the state is accepting submittals, if you will, for their project priority list is what it's called. And we have, as you're aware, I guess I'll first clarify this for Manager Wynant's benefit. Slight, small, timely update on RCD 2, 3, and 5. This will not supplant a larger, more thorough update as has been requested. We're going to hopefully shoot for your April workshop for that. So just maybe put that in the back of your mind for the future. But it is timely. The submittal deadline is March 4th for this project priority list. And what it does by getting some of these project components on that list, it just starts the process or opens the door for us to potentially in the future seek either clean water revolving fund loans for the projects and then also what are called PSIG grants. It's a point source implementation grant that is available for stormwater infrastructure projects. Often you see it for, I think, for wastewater and things, some other public infrastructure. But stormwater is eligible, And I do know that there have been some of our municipal partners that have obtained PSIG grants for projects in the watershed. Specifically, St. Anthony received one for its flood control project at Silver Lake Road, which was kind of an offshoot of the RCD 235 project a number of years ago. So again, we're working with the City of New Brighton on this specifically to add both the Jones Lake improvement project and the what we call Hanson Park Phase 2. Both of those projects we intend to submit to the project priority list. And again, it just starts a process whereby in the future we potentially could have access to some either grant or loan funds, depending on what where we wish to go, and we'll see where it goes. It's a competitive program, and projects are ranked, and you may not get funding one year, and you may down the road. So still learning about it. It's not a funding source that the district has used before, but cities are a little more keen to it, and again, appreciate New Brighton's encouragement to get these projects on that list. So we'll be working with them on that, and just wanted to provide that update for the board.
Madam President, I have a question. Is this the DNR that you're submitting this list to, or is that a separate outfit that we were looking for money from?
Yeah.
Separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam President, Manager Waller, this is a separate funding source, separate agencies. The DNR's flood hazard mitigation program is something we are continuing to track as well, and we'll ensure that those projects remain on that list. One of the challenges we are having with, as I mentioned, the Jones Lake and the Hanson Park project components are kind of prerequisites for a lot of the rest of the work. It also happens that they're very large, very expensive projects, and they, depending on how you look at them, they don't always fit really well into some of the established funding sources that are out there. So we're trying to navigate that as best we can. We also run into a situation where, I'll pick on the Jones Lake project as an example. If we were to find out tomorrow that we've got funding, it's a $6 million, plus or minus effort. We get funding for that. That project is going to force a little bit of a staff availability crunch at the district, just due to the heavy lifting that'll be involved to move a project of that scope and size forward. So just be aware of that generally. As we have any funding opportunities that come up or recommendations for moving some of these forward, we'll certainly be in touch with the board as something like that may result in a little bit of a chain reaction of decisions for the board. So like I say, we'll keep you posted on that. I'm sure Nick will do a good job of that. So any other questions, I guess, at this time, let me know, and
So,
be happy to respond.
Madam President, Kyle, what state agency has this project priority list? Who? If it's not the DNR, who?
It's a pollution control agency.
All right,
and,
thank you.
The Public Facilities Authority.
And public health as well.
Public
Yes.
health?
Yeah.
Public facilities?
President Parnell will share with Manager Waller here the cover sheet from the item, but correct. Public Facilities Authority, Pollution Control, and Department of Health.
Thank you. I just wanted to know. Always good to hear more sources, so I remember next time that there's availabilities here.
Yeah.
That's really important. Thank you for work on this. Glad to hear it.
Yep, President Preiner, Board of Managers, continuing with the administrator updates. Yes, so this is one opportunity. We want to get our foot in the door, so to speak. Kyle did a good job of making the note regarding staff capacity. Should, always good to receive some grant dollars or revolving funds, if you will, but we also have to address other issues as we move through these. Second item I wanted to share, the Shoreview City Hall dais council chambers here that were within are going to be renovated. It looks like that will interfere with 5 of the district meetings this coming spring, summer. I'll note that I previously noted the 3 meetings that would be interfered with for the absentee voting. That would cause us to be across the hall in a community room. It gets challenging with the technology that we have and that sort of thing. Shoreview certainly has been gracious in supporting us for accommodations, although we have a what we're seeing as maybe a preferred arrangement, which would be to engage Mounds View City Hall. They would let us use their chambers. They utilize the same firm that has the technician present, so it would be rather seamless. Otherwise, we'll be in like I said, a community room with technology. We wouldn't have the technician without some additional cost. So with that, I guess I would like board consensus if you're comfortable going to Mounds View for a number of those.
I think we'd be better than trying to adjust to the technology.
Yes, yeah, appreciate it. So that would be how we'll proceed. Back to the conflict of interest. Would you like more discussion on that at the workshop? I don't know where Manager Bradley shaking his head no.
No,
I think
we're set.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And fourth, I think it's good for you to know that Mr. Otterness did say, hey, I'm in traffic, and he was late, but he did let me know that. When you see me texting here, I'm actually texting with other staff who are on board. I'm not taking care of personal things.
You're not playing video games?
I am not, no.
Gee, we used to have a manager here from Ramsey County that did that, yeah.
Nope, I'm actually
Back in the 90s.
communicating with the good staff that you have and consultants. So I'll leave it at that, if nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Manager's updates, Manager Wynant.
Hi. Nick, where are we at with COVID, the numbers again? Are all 3 of our counties still in the high area?
Yes, President Preiner, Manager Wynant, I did look yesterday. This is on the CDC website. There's a map of the United States. There has been some change. The highest status of contagion, the transmittal or likelihood of communicating the virus is listed there. All of the United States was in the substantial, the highest category. There's been a slight reduction in 2 of the counties in southern Minnesota, but the whole metro and our counties in particular are all substantial at this point. I am watching that.
Okay, thank you. I have no updates, Madam Chair.
Okay. Manager Bradley, tell us about Hawaii.
Well, it's warmer there. Glad, however, always to come back to this. So,
there you go.
thank you.
Any other comments? Anything?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I have nothing.
Okay. Manager Waller?
Yes, Madam President, thank you. Thank you very much for sending me this, staff for sending me the mod schedule here, legislative event, all right? And so I was looking through it, and Mod's asking us to go down there, which we pay this $7,500 for, and we're going to pay some more dollars to go down there and participate in this. And I didn't see the bills for Forest Lake listed here. Now, maybe we have 2 bills. They're sponsored in the Senate. It's the same bill. It's a Senate file, House file. In the Senate file, it's 2867, and Senator Housley is the sponsor. And in the House, it's Representative Detmer, and it's 3058. And that's for the dollars to go for Forest Lake. Why is that important? Because in our plan, since I don't own a laptop, I brought my laptop with me. The current plan, on page 426, we have Anoka County Ditch 15, Judicial Ditch 4, Stormwater Master Planning. And that's really what this bill at Forest Lake is looking for as part of this master planning in order to go forward. So I was very disappointed to see Ms. Chavins doesn't have our bill or isn't going around and trying to push it. You know, I think Ahmad owes us that to do it. So they certainly have enough in here about the Red River Valley, and God bless them up there and everywhere else, and salt and whatever. But ours are just as important. And like I say, we pay enough money into that organization to have it done. And then finally, I wanted to let you know that Washington County Board of Commissioners has a newsletter that comes out periodically, about 3-4 times a year. So I'm sure all counties do. You know, I don't think that they're exceptional. It has things on there like the legislative agenda is on my latest issue, and who the new chairman of the board is, because they rotate it every year in Washington County as a rotating chairman. But inside, besides the importance about libraries being accessible, which I'm a fan of libraries, county works with water management organizations, and they're all listed here. And I just want to quickly say that we had a bullet point for Rice Creek. Rice Creek Watershed District has promoted stormwater reuse for irrigation for more than a decade, beginning with the Anoka Ridge Golf Course in Hugo in 2012. It continues to work with projects at Water's Edge, Hugo City Hall, Lions Park, and the County State Aid Highway 8 Boulevard. So I just want to let you know that we got a little free press. A lot of people in Washington County do read this. We're not the only watershed, by the way. Every watershed had a little bullet in it, so I mean, nothing spectacular. But oftentimes, this is not something that would come outside of Washington County. Since our office isn't in Washington County, you're not going to receive it. So it's a mention. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. Anything else? I'll need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call. Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
Manager Kreiner? Yes. Motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Drive careful. Are you driving, Marcy, or flying in and out?
Hopefully we're driving. It's supposed to snow here any moment.
Oh, that's always fun, Texas. People don't want to-
Yes, you got it. So we'll see you sometime. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.